Hey buddies, Mr. Pugly here, coming at you another Wonderlands build. Today I want to show you my Reaper of Amnesia build that basically utilizes the Selective Amnesia to its utmost capability to deal tons and tons of damage. As you guys saw at the beginning of the clip, this is all about dealing large amounts of damage while in Reaper Bones, and Reaper Bones has a nifty interactions with the Selective Amnesia that I'll talk about in just a bit. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of this video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and follow me on Twitch in the top right. You have no idea how much helps me out. And let's get into the video.
Legendary? Whoa! No way, dude!
So first things first, as in tradition, let's talk about the skill tree first. Now the skill tree is going to be a mix of Graveborn and Brrzerker to allow us to get the most amount of bonuses as possible. You might be wondering why I'm going all the way down on the capstone on Graveborn, but I'll talk about that as we go down the skill tree. So let's first start with Graveborn. First things first, we got 3 out of 3 on Faithful Thralls. Faithful Thralls is an enormous power boost that we can use at all times and as we kill targets. So this is of course a 3 out of 3. It should be a 3 out of 3 on all Graveborn builds. There's no reason not to take it. We got 5 out of 5 on Essence Drain to allow us to get our Buffmeister up quicker, which is always excellent. We got 5 out of 5 on Dark Pact to increase our dark magic damage as well as our bonus dark magic damage from Reaper Bones. We have 2 out of 3 on Harvest. Honestly, it's mainly for filler, but I thought that it's better filler than other points in the skill tree, so take that as you will. You can put these points anywhere you want, but we have this mainly to get further down the skill tree. 3 out of 3 on Sacrament to increase our health regeneration whenever we cast a spell. Most of the time, I'm not worrying about activating the skill. I activate it when I activate it, you know, it's whatever. So I usually don't focus on activating this, even though it increases my uptime of Reaper Bones. But normally I activate Reaper Bones and then Buffmeister, so, you know, I kind of synergize with it without really even thinking about it. Next, we have 3 out of 3 on Dark Hydras to, of course, give us up to 3 Dark Hydras to increase our total damage with Faithful Thralls, which is always nice. 3 out of 3 on Ascension. The reason why we're going with 3 out of 3 on Ascension is due to the fact, and the whole reason why we're going so low on the Graveborn tree, because the spell damage power boost is going to be very beneficial for our Cryo Buffmeister. If you guys aren't aware, Cryo Buffmeister always scales with spell damage, so the more spell damage, the better, and to synergize with a couple other things. But because of the fact that most of our damage is going to be coming from all damage dealt, we aren't going to get a lot of bonuses from other elemental Buffmeisters. For example, since all this build does is basically gun damage, if I went with a Fire Buffmeister or Dark Magic Buffmeister, as you guys might be thinking, I would only be dealing gun damage source, and I don't have a lot of gun damage source on this build. It's mostly all damage dealt. So because we have that 60% bonus spell damage from Ascension, we're going to get a lot of more bang from our buck by using a Cryo Buffmeister, also due to the fact that the Cryo Buffmeister has Zap, which means that it's going to then give us 80% more spell damage, which, you know, makes the Cryo Buffmeister deal even more damage. So that's the whole reason why I'm running with that. Next, we have Lord Edges, just to increase our damage and damage reduction. Honestly, it's not that great, but we're going to be reducing our HP constantly, so might as well get some bonuses from that. And then we have the Blessing skill, which activates our kill skill. Next, we have 5 out of 5 on Ancestral Frost. Got 5 out of 3 on Icebreaker to increase our damage against frozen enemies, which is mostly useful against bosses because most enemies die super quickly with this build from mobbing. But it is also nice to get that insane multiplier on any enemy we hit with Frost, since it's going to be getting hit with Frost all the time. Got 5 out of 5 on Old Ways, just to increase our damage even more. 1 point into Instinct. I would like to put more points in there, but we are limited with the amount of points we have in the game at the current moment. So we have Relay Speed and Weapon Swap Speed, which is always nice. And most importantly, we have 6 out of 3 on Cold Snap, which increases our movement speed by 18%. But after we activate Reaper Bones, we of course get Enrage, which means we're going to increase our movement speed by 36%, which is phenomenal. This is going to be very important for Selective Amnesia interactions, as I'll talk about in a few moments. And then we have Relentless Rage, which of course allows us to go into our Save Our Souls and stay in there for a longer time. And of course, allowing us to be in rage after we kill an enemy from Save Our Soul, allowing us to get all those sweet enrage bonuses in the tree, as well as the class feat. Next, let's go over the gear. Now, the only gear that I primarily like to use, honestly, just because of how much of a beast it is, and we're already optimizing dark magic damage, is going to be the Ruby Spite. Of course, I could use other weapons, like for example, the Gluttony. I feel like the problem with the Gluttony is that it reduces our HP, so we aren't in Reaper Bones as long. We could use Throttable Hole, but I feel like to optimize it, I would want to be a Spellshot due to its spell damage properties, and a couple other stuff like a Dagger Storm Purple Fear Not. But the Ruby Spite is so good, especially because of that hidden 200% increased damage from going into Altfire mode, that you could just basically use this all the time. So I'm primarily going to be using this weapon for this build. It has the enchantment on spell cast, increased dark magic damage by 30% for 5 seconds. We need as much elemental bonuses as possible on this build to increase our damage, because we're pretty solid and stacked on different enchantments and our damage formula. So elemental damage is going to increase our damage by the most amount at the current moment. So we have Goblin Pickaxe, which is, while action skill active, increase elemental damage by 35% with Echo. Now, we could go with Ancient to allow us to get Reaper Bones quicker, but I feel like Echo's too good to pass up due to the fact we have a ton of all damage dealt on our build, allowing Echo to even scale higher than it would normally. Next, let's actually talk about the armor piece before I talk about the other weapons first. Now, the reason why the Selective Amnesia is so good on this build is due to the fact that Selective Amnesia procs 100% of the time while in Reaper Bones. So it says when taking damage, basically fire trail below the Fate Maker, as well as increasing our movement speed, but all the damage dealt is increased by movement speed. Now, this damage dealt is increased by the total movement speed gained as opposed to how fast you are moving. So you could actually be not moving and still get all the bonuses from the Selective Amnesia, which is crazy. And it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So 1% movement speed equals 1% all damage dealt. And since we have like over 100 movement speed on this build, we get like easily over 100 all damage dealt percentage damage, which is crazy. So this is going to be increasing our bonus elemental damage, both of them with Reaper Bones, and the enrage bonuses, our melee, obviously our guns, and everything in between, which is crazy to think about. So that's why Selective Amnesia is so good. I did go with 3 out of 3 on Cold Snap to increase our movement speed even higher, to allow us to increase our total damage dealt even higher. Now, one could say 3 out of 3 on Icebreaker is better. I played around with it. I felt like 3 out of 3 in Cold Snap was just so much better as opposed to 3 out of 3 on Icebreaker, despite Icebreaker being on its own separate multiplier in the damage formula, like at the end, making it like super good. But just more movement speed was able to make the build perform better as opposed to that crazy multiplier, from my testing at least. Next, we have 2 mood rings that are identical. Of course, every build should have identical rings because of how easy it is to duplicate items in this game by just putting it into the bank and then reloading your save and taking the item. So of course, we have 2 identical rings with gun damage, axe skill cooldown rate to get Reaper Bones quicker, as well as pistol critical hit damage. Now, I'm still running a mood ring. I still feel the same about mood ring, and comparative to all the other rings, it's just so easy to activate. It's on the same power scale as every other ring, so might as well just use it because of how easy it is to activate. Next, we have a Curse Wit. The game plan with this build is of course activating Reaper Bones, and while Reaper Bones is active, we of course are not going to be able to regenerate our shield, which means we can benefit from Curse Wit even longer, which is why we're running it. While it has the enchantment while action skill is active, it increases dark magic damage by 50%, which is a no-brainer because we're primarily focusing on dark magic damage. Next, we have a Sacrificial Scape with dark magic damage and Brrzerker Power. Brrzerker Power increasing the total damage of Enrage, which is awesome, while we have dark magic damage to increase our total dark magic damage overall. Now, this could be Graveborn Power to increase Reaper Bones Power, which would probably be the better play, but I haven't personally been able to find a Primordial Sacrificial Scape, dark magic damage, double roll all damage dealt with Graveborn. It's just so hard to find those specific odd rolls. I personally couldn't find it, so you could probably run a Graveborn, but the Brrzerker Power is so powerful by increasing our Enrage bonus that is still valuable. And one could say that the Brrzerker Power might be more useful overall for the build because you could deal more damage outside of your burst window, aka Reaper Bones, because of the total increased damage on enraged, so that's nice, but we are primarily trying to optimize the burst window like most Wonderlands builds. So if you can find a exact copy of this but Graveborn power, that's probably better for you to get. And then finally we have a Cryo Buffmeister. I already explained why the Cryo Buffmeister is so valuable, but it has on spell cast increased gun damage by 30%, as well as Zap and Pew. Pew, of course, increasing our gunplay abilities by shooting faster, reloading faster, and all the shebang with the gun handling, while Zap increasing to 80% of spell damage power, which I already explained why that's so important. And then here are my hero stats. I have maxed out on strength, which is a no-brainer by now. We got maxed out on wisdom to increase our status effect damage. More damage you deal, the stronger your dots are going to be, so might as well optimize your dots, as I said, to Amnesia with all my builds. And then finally we have halfway into Entombment to get Reaper Bones back quicker. And then finally here are my myth ranks. 92 points into Druid, 92 points into Archmage, 93 points into Blade Master, and 93 points into Deadeye. I will say that if you're running this build, you want to try to have as much movement speed as possible, and Deadeye gives you a free 25% extra movement speed, which means 25% all damage dealt. So if you can dump all your points into movement speed next time you level up, try to do that. I personally haven't had the chance to do that. I've been trying to max out magazine size, but that's a discussion for another video. And then finally, let me show you how this build runs on a normal mobbing scenario. You already are aware how powerful it is in bossing, but let me just show you how I like to run the build normally. Since I want to optimize my burst window, of course, what I always like to do whenever I see a tough enemy or whenever Reaper Bones is up and I want to deal lots of damage, I activate Reaper Bones, activate Buffmeister, and then we go to town on any enemy we see. Now, normally the Dragon Lord statues take quite a bit to clear, but because of the stacked amount of bonuses we get with our Selective Amnesia, we're able to clear hard enemies in just a split second like that. And I did forget to mention the Buffmeister, although this is common knowledge, does give us 80% more movement speed, which means after we activate Reaper Bones, we activate Buffmeister. You know, that's 80% more all damage dealt, so that's why Buffmeister is best in slot on this build. But, you know, most builds run Buffmeister anyways, so you probably didn't really need to know why that was so important. And as you guys probably know, after you get a kill with Ruby Spite, it does start homing and shooting faster, so hopefully I can showcase that in just a few moments. So ideally, after you get a kill, which is going to happen super duper quickly, you're going to see your abilities to home are increased, which means that you could essentially run around really, really fast and not having to worry about aiming, which is super, super good on this build. And I'd say on most builds, but the homing property is especially awesome on this build because you can run really fast and then not have to worry about aiming, which is the whole nature of the build. So it really just benefits this build really well, despite, you know, the Ruby Spite benefiting, I'd say, like all dark magic builds or most builds. And one thing I also forgot to mention, which is crazy, usually I always mention this, but I feel like I've said it so many times that it probably forgot to cross my mind, I guess. But the Goblin Pickaxe is important here because we can increase our movement speed by a total of 30%, which means obviously on this build 30% more all damage dealt, as well as spell cooldown and action skill cooldown, which means we're going to get our Buffmeister and Reaper Bones, aka our burst windows, up quicker, which is why it's so important. One could say you could run the peg leg, which means you're going to get on demand 30% movement speed, as opposed with the Gun Pickaxe where you got to swing a few times or collect some gold from the enemies you killed, which is, you know, all the time, which is why I think the Goblin Pickaxe is more better, because you can kind of just have this up at all times without worrying about meleeing, but also it has the benefit of the action skill cooldown rate and spell cooldown rate. It's more important for your buff windows than the peg leg, and the reload speed with the Ruby Spite isn't so dreadful where you'd obviously want that over the Gun Pickaxe. So that's the reason why we're running a Goblin Pickaxe even more than I've explained before. One neat interaction on this build as well with the Sacrificial Skeep is its ability to extend Reaper Bones. I've explained this in a previous video, but pretty much when you activate Reaper Bones, it's going to obviously reduce your HP and thus activate this Selective Amnesia, as you can see right here. But this sheep is going to heal you to 100% HP for a total of 10 seconds, which means you're going to see Reaper Bones activate and last longer. So that's why the Sacrificial Skeep is especially important on this build, but I like to use it on all builds. You know, once again, amazing survivability on any build. Next, let's go into an Elite Portal, just so you can see how quickly it's able to defeat Elite rooms as well. And it's probably not really needed to be said, but the Reaper Bones and running dark magic and everything like that helps increase the total amount of time you're in Reaper Bones, because, you know, dark magic damage, of course, heals you for a few bits, or whatever I should say about that, but you get the gist. The dark magic is going to heal you, which means you can be in Reaper Bones even longer, but you know, you're going to get that no matter what you do, due to the fact that you should be running Reaper Bones on this build, which means you're going to get dark magic on your build whether or not you like it. One nice utility tool with the Reaper Bones is when you activate, it's going to instantly heal you all the way, which is something I don't often think about because of the fact that most builds don't use Reaper Bones, so that's a nice little utility. If you see yourself get low, you could activate Reaper Bones as a nice little defensive option, with also the ability of not allowing you to actually go down while it's active. So if you were to die with it, it's going to allow you to get a few seconds of invulnerability, which is always nice to see. And in the past, most people didn't even use Reaper Bones due to the fact that, you know, it didn't work with most enchantments and stuff like that. So you would just not see Reaper Bones just not used. But since it's been fixed, I've been seeing a lot more plays with Reaper Bones, which is always exciting. But I feel like this interaction with Selective Amnesia really cements the reason that you should use Reaper Bones if you find the armor piece, because it's just such a nasty combo. We're getting rounds to like 200, maybe like 300% all damage dealt at all times when we activate our burst windows with, you know, obviously the Buffmeister. So it's just such a nasty combo to allow you to increase your total damage. It's so crazy. And then finally, let me activate this elite room and go into one of these shrine encounters where it spawns a bunch of enemies, just so you can see how powerful and fast it's able to mob. So I'm just going to activate my 2 burst windows, and I'm just going to go to town on any enemy that spawns. Now that my homing capability is unlocked, I can kind of just stay back and kill all the enemies. If I wanted to, I could actually just stand still, as said before, where movement doesn't actually matter on how much damage you're dealing. So I'm going to get the full damage bonus the entire time as I attack these enemies, even if I'm standing still. And just about, what, maybe like 15 seconds, we cleared this room, which is awesome. So this build is able to deal lots of damage, allows you to run really fast, just deal lots of damage, and have a fun little interaction to kill basically any enemy you see, and boss, as you guys saw in the clips before. You guys know me, I love builds that is able to move really fast, so this is especially really fun for me. But just being able to deal large amounts of damage even when standing still is just a ton of fun, and I suggest you guys try this out if you have a Selective Amnesia, or if you're on PC, download my save file because it is such a fun build to try. And as always, a big shout out to the members who make these videos possible. We got Jason Noodles, Clairvoyance, Rick Inglesias, Josh Stig, 31 Bar 70, Grey Wolf, Wishkeeper, Lexa, and Cameron. These are the people who support me as little as $5 a month, and you can also support me as little as $5 a month by becoming a Patreon or a member on YouTube by clicking the link in the comments or description or on the top right. The more members we have, the closer I get to becoming full-time, which means more videos for you guys. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye-bye.
And the last shall be first to immerse in a pass out heat, facing him out with a moxie melt till he woke up drowning in tchotchke hell. War in a cave with a torch on a wall, then a window arrangement of porcelain dolls.